Bob, if you could just let us know when we're live. I would like to call to order the June 21st regular board meeting of the Stow-Munroe Falls Board of Education at 5 p.m. Mr. Whitaker is unexpectedly delayed, but will be joining us shortly. Roll call, please.
Jerry Bedio.
Here.
Nancy Brown.
Here.
Lisa Johnson Bowers.
Here.
Jessica Wright.
Here.
Noted for the record, Jason Whitaker is currently absent.
Okay, if you all please stand for the pledge. Prior to adopting tonight's agenda, we are going to have a presentation from our chiefs regarding district collaboration with local law enforcement, including DEI efforts. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Brown for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. So at our last meeting, we discussed the possibility at our work sessions of having some updates from the DEI committee, and we don't have another work session scheduled until August, so we included it tonight. Given that the focus last month at our last meeting, we talked about how a lot of families are not feeling safe. It seemed appropriate to bring in our safety forces. I've been part of the community subcommittee on which the chiefs of police of both Monroe Falls, Jerry Hughes, and Stow, Jeff Film, are members. And I've asked them to come tonight just to give a brief presentation about how they came to be involved with the DEI committee, steps they've taken in their own departments since the murder of George Floyd last summer, and just some things they think we as a community can be doing in partnership with the schools and vice versa. So I introduce Chief Film and Chief Hughes. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jerry Hughes. I'm the Chief of Police for the Monroe Falls Police Department. Just to give a little background here, I think it's important to address recent events. But as a background, when I started as Chief of Monroe Falls Police Department, I sat down with every officer individually and had a list. One side, what I expect from my officers, one side what they can expect from me. And at the top of that list was we will all practice the golden rule, is to treat each other like we would want to be treated. That's how we start off with every officer. When I first got there, I was a little concerned with our policy manual. It seemed just a little bit outdated. They had done a good job with making up their own policy manual, but I saw room for improvement. I took it to the mayor that I wanted to bring in Lexipol, and it cost a little bit of out of the budget, but Lexipol, if you're not familiar with it, is a nationwide company that writes policies and procedures for police departments, and a good percentage of police departments use Lexipol for their professional expertise. Every policy is written and reviewed by a battery of attorneys that they have to make sure they comply with federal, state, and local laws, and are constantly reviewed and updated. As part of that package, we get 30 what we call daily training bulletins a month. So officers have to log in and they have to do a daily training bulletin, and it has some section of a policy that they go over, and then they have to answer the question at the end of the policy. So it's constantly reviewed, and it's constantly in everybody's mind, and it's constantly updated. We're also a member of the Ohio Collaborative, and that is a group in Ohio that kind of looks over police departments and looks for certain areas to be covered. Our use of force policy, it includes deadly force, is tested on every year during our in-service training. And our use of force policy also includes the duty to intercede to prevent the use of unreasonable force and report it to the supervisor if you observe it. So we started with Lexipol back in 2019, and I'm sure Chief Film has Lexipol too, and it's a great component of your training and your in-service. As far as our use of force policy goes, we review every single use of force. First, the sergeant reviews it. He does an investigation. He makes his findings. He brings it to me. We sit down and review it together, and then we talk to the officers. Luckily, I can say in Monroe Falls, we don't have a whole lot of uses of force, but they do happen. And when they do happen, we examine exactly what took place. And I will tell you that use of force, in my experience, the great majority of them are because of either the person being arrested is on drugs or alcohol or both, and or is having a mental illness type episode. That makes up the majority of our use of force. I was president of the Summit County Chiefs of Police when this happened. Jeff was on the executive board, and we discussed this from the Summit County Chiefs of Police perspective. And we put out a letter addressed to the Akron Beacon Journal and other newspapers shortly after the George Floyd tragedy on where we stood as a county, because we thought it was important that everybody in Summit County knows that they can trust their police officers and that we're all operating from the same page. That was placed, the Beacon ran it rather quickly, and I was appreciative of that. In fact, it was in the June 5th Akron Beacon Journal 2020. During our in-service training, every year there are certain things that we discuss, and use of force is one of them. And in our 2020, we concentrated on the George Floyd incident with an emphasis of how we would prevent that from ever happening in Monroe Falls. And through our training and our policy, the most important, through our ethics, we would not have that situation happen in Monroe Falls. Our use of force policy, if anybody's injured, says they're injured, feels like they're injured, the officer thinks maybe they're injured, if there's any possibility that they're injured, we have our paramedics check them out. Also in 2020, I had our guys take training with the Akron Police Department. I retired from the Akron Police Department. I still have connections there. And I had our officers take implicit bias police training with the Akron Police Department, and there was a reason for that. I wanted them to take this course, one, because it's next to the course I know the instructor, and two, because they would be in there with a more diverse class of students and diverse instructors than what I can supply in Monroe Falls. And I think that training went excellent. I got positive feedback from both our guys and from the Akron Police Department Training Bureau. So I was very happy with that training. The bottom line is, when bad incidents like this occur, we talk to every one of our officers. I personally, as soon as I saw the video, I told our mayor, I said, Mayor, this is bad, and we're going to have to discuss this with each and every officer, and that's exactly what I did. I talked to every officer that we have, and then we review it in service, so I know that we're all on the same page. Now, officers, whether the public understands this or not, the objective is to avoid or minimize injury during the use of force. And everybody says, well, you need to de-escalate. Well, to de-escalate, it's a two-sided street, and you have to be able to get some acceptance from the subject that you're dealing with. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends mostly on, do they have alcohol or drugs on board? Can they understand what we're trying to do? Or are they in a mental state where they're really unable to comprehend what we're trying to do? But we use force when we have to, We don't go out to look to use force, but sometimes it happens. And when it does happen, it's reviewed, checked, and double-checked. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Chief Film.
Good evening. I apologize ahead of time for my voice. With the cold or the hot weather and my allergies, I'm losing my voice. But my name is Jeff Film. I am the Chief of Police for the City of Stow Police Department, and I've been with the City of Stow for 30 years. And I just started my 8th year as Chief. Last summer, the mayor asked that, I have to put these on now, the older parents in the room will understand why. But last summer, the mayor asked me to be part of a DEI committee with the Stow City Schools. I wasn't really sure what that meant. I was a little apprehensive with all the stuff that was going on in our society as far as the police shootings, and I won't lie, I was pretty nervous going to the first Zoom meeting. Here I am sitting in my office, with all my securities, and I'm on a video camera, with the computer, and my gut's turning inside out because I'm not sure what's going to be said and how people are going to react to my comments or my thoughts. I can tell you that I'm very proud to be part of this committee. It's been a very rewarding environment, and to be part of a process to come up with to make sure our kids are safe in the schools is paramount. Because I know the better that the kids do in school, the less likely chances that I'm going to see them or my officers are going to see them out in the streets. I've been asked by many residents of the community and community leaders about what we are doing as a law enforcement agency to train and educate our officers on the proper use of force, diversity, and police accountability. The Stow Police Department holds ourselves to the highest of standards. Here are a few of the protocols that we have in place. First and foremost, we have a very strict hiring process. Right now, actually, I just had a great conversation with Judy Hill from the NAACP, the president of the Summit County chapter, a couple weeks ago about getting her help to get more diversity in our workforce. Diversity in the law enforcement workforce across the United States is very, very low, and it's very tough to get people of color to join our ranks. So I reached out to her a couple weeks ago because we are at a point where I have to have a new test, and I'm excited to have her input and her help in moving forward with that. Second of all our officers have received racial discrimination training. In fact, in August of this year, we'll be doing a 4-hour block on implicit bias. We have a multitude of policies and procedures that prohibit discrimination in the workplace, that encourage and require de-escalation techniques. As Chief Hughes has spoken, in 2020, we started with a national policy procedure manual called Lexipol. It's one that's been approved by the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police and CLIA, which is the Commission of Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We also, the City of Stow also meets the Ohio Collaborative Standards, and just for those that do not know, the Ohio Collaborative is a 12-person panel of law enforcement experts and community leaders throughout the state of Ohio that was established to have state standards for law enforcement officers. This began by the governor in August 28th of 2015, and these policies include the use of force, bias-free policing, body-worn camera systems, employee recruiting and hiring practices, community engagement, and agency wellness. And the City of Stow is one of many agencies in Ohio that meet those collaborative standards. As far as our use of force policies and reporting, as Chief Hughes said, every incident where force is used, our officers are required to document that force. Then it was reviewed by a supervisor, and after that, that report goes to our use of force committee, which is reviewed to make sure that the standards and the procedures that the officer used were within protocol. After that, it was sent to our law department for an independent review to make sure that all laws and procedures were followed. In cases where we use lethal force or force that causes serious physical harm, we have elected, the city of Stow has elected to call in BCI, which is the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, to do our investigation for us, an outside agency. And we also call in the Summit County Prosecutor's Office from the scene to come out and handle all legal aspects. So that's another outside agency to look to make sure that we were in compliance with our rules, regulations in the state of Ohio. I'm very proud to tell you that we've had body cameras since 2015. We were one of the first departments in Summit County to have department-wide body cameras. And we've had cruiser cameras, or we call mobile cameras, in our cruisers since the year 2000. Not a lot of departments around here can say that. And it's a very good tool for our officers. It requires them to be more professional. It mandates that they follow rules and regulations. And I can say that the body camera system that we have, is what I really like about it is when the officers pull in the back lot, their mobiles automatically download, and when they put their cameras in to be charged, those automatically download. The officers have no ability to get to those videos and change anything. So it's really a police accountability for that part. As far as community involvement, we hold open houses every year. We didn't last year because of COVID. We also have a national night out where we invite our families to come see what we're about at our station. We usually have some kid rides and for the children, and just to make them feel more welcome and to let them know, our police department's here to serve you, the community. Our police department, we are not to be feared. We are to be sought after. We hold a Citizens Academy with Cuyahoga Falls, Monroe Falls, Talmadge, and Silver Lake. Once a year, it's a 6-week academy where any citizen could sign up for the academy. You meet once a week, and we have officers come in, and they actually give you training that we go through so you can get the same perspective that what our officers are going through. The city of Stow, we do citizen ride-along, so if you ever want to come out and ride with an officer, I ask you to contact my department, and I'd be happy to set that up for you. This year, we're finally bringing back our Neighborhood Watch program, which we used to have for many years. But instead of having it at the station, what we want to do and what we are doing is we're going to go out into the community, and we're going to go to your location, your groups, your organizations, and we're going to talk to you to find out what we need to do to better serve you. And one of the most important things that I think that the city of Stow has, that a lot of departments do not, is we have a Stow Youth Division. We have 3 youth workers, one's a licensed social worker, and what they do, it's a diversion program that was implemented in the 1980s, I think 84 or 85, and it was one of the first ones in the state of Ohio. And what we do for our youth offenders, instead of sending them down to juvenile court, we have them go through our programs where we can drug test them, we can give them life skills, we can work with their parents, help the parents with some parenting skills and some advice, and I think it's a lot more productive and rewarding both for the children and the parents. And lastly, I have been chief, like I said, since June 1st of 2014. I've been working with the superintendent since then. Our department has a great working relationship with the Stow-Munroe Falls School System. We have 2 full-time officers. One's a DARE officer, and the other one's an SRO in the schools every day. On top of that, since 2012, we've had 2 officers and sometimes 3 patrolling the schools 8 hours a day. Every day the school is open all year long. And the reason that they're there is not, and I once had a parent ask me, has the crime rate gone up? Have they made more arrests in the schools because these officers are out in the schools? And I said, you misunderstand what the program's for. They're not there to go out and make arrests. They're there to protect. And they're there to let the kids know that we are part of the community just as they are, and we are there for them. We're there to break down the walls and those biases that come along that the kids see, and try to break down some of the fears that they have about what law enforcement are and what we are about and what we are here for. And the number one thing we are here for is service. I think we as a law enforcement agency are heading in the right direction. We have a great working relationship with our citizens, our schools, and our businesses. We continue to assess and work with our community leaders to bring the highest level of service to those that we serve. Our current protocols far exceed The currently discussed mandates by many community reform leaders across the country, but we are always looking to evolve. We are always looking to to improve our performance. We are always looking to be better. Being part of this DEI committee, the subcommittee, has been very rewarding, and we look forward to working with the members and to make our community that much better. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here this evening. Okay, moving on to the adoption of tonight's agenda. May I have motion to adopt tonight's agenda, please?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call when you're ready.
Whitaker. Aye. Bedio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye. Okay, the first item on our agenda is comments from the audience. We'll remind those in attendance that this is a meeting of the Board of Education conducted in the view of the public. Any person while being heard at the Board of Education meeting may be called to order by the board president or any member of the board for failure to be relevant to the business of the board, for vulgarity, or for personal attacks of persons or institutions. At this time, citizens will have an opportunity to bring their concerns before the Board of Education. All comments should be directed to the board. Individuals presenting concerns and/or questions to the board may not receive complete answers the same evening. The board will study and consider your concerns and will either have a board member or central office administrator contact you as soon as the information you require is available. Because of the size of our audience and the expected number of comments we are going to limit to 3 minutes. I will endeavor to give you a 30-second warning, but please give me a little grace if I happen to miss it. Okay, so at this time, if anybody...
I guess they can line up.
Hello. I have a statement on behalf of the Akron chapter of the NAACP.
Okay, I'm sorry. Before I'm going to real
go
quick.
ahead.
When you come up to the microphone, if you'll please give your name and your address for the minutes,
You got
please.
it. My name is Gwyneth Jones. I live at 190 Gaylord Drive in Monroe Falls.
Oh, please go ahead.
All right. The NAACP of Akron believes all schools must embed the principles and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and transformative social emotional learning into education, and strongly condemns any efforts that impede or ban these principles, such as Ohio House Bills 322 and 327. The NAACP Akron is committed to advocating and supporting equitable local, state, and federal policies that establish education standards, allocated resources, and practices for a high-quality education, which include great teaching, safe learning environments, and experiences that maximize each student's potential. The NAACP of Akron believes that public education must be grounded in principles of truth, justice, critical thinking, and social-emotional well-being. Therefore, the NAACP of Akron supports approaches to education that integrate diverse perspectives, critical thinking, social justice, root cause analysis, and student agency. Additionally, the NAACP Akron believes that these approaches must be done in authentic partnerships with families and communities. The evidence supports a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and transformative social-emotional learning is essential to creating conditions for learning that are safe, nurturing, academically rigorous, and meaningful, in which students develop a resilient sense of belonging and efficacy and agency to their community. In contrast, inequity, discrimination, intolerance, and exclusion perpetuate complex trauma, toxic stress, insecure and fragile identities, and hinder achievement. Therefore, the NAACP of Akron strongly condemns any efforts that impede or ban these principles, such as Ohio House Bills 322 and 327, along with misinformation campaigns, for example, the misrepresentation of critical race theory. The NAACP Akron recognizes the current efforts to limit the critical examination of U.S. history as an assault to undermine civil rights and liberation gains. Throughout history, our nation has been in a constant battle for equal access to quality, equitable, and culturally responsive education. Dating back to the criminalization of enslaved Africans learning to read and write, the 1954 ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that school segregation was unconstitutional in the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibiting discrimination in public schools based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, and the desegregation of school busing throughout the 1990s. The battle is not over. We must ensure that the policies and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion are foundational to curriculum, policies, and procedures, teaching practices, and social-emotional support structures. The NAACP of Akron supports Stow-Munroe Falls School District's efforts to build the diversity, equity, and inclusion capacity of staff and integrate equity, social-emotional learning, and critical thinking into the educational experiences and curriculum with students. Okay.
I'm going to have to ask everyone to please limit it to 3 minutes. As you can see, we do have a lot of people who would like to speak this evening.
Antoinette East Jenkins, 160 North River Road, Monroe Falls. DEI is critical to the lives of the Stow-Munroe Falls School kids. I'm not sure how we got here. How is it a bad thing to celebrate diversity of all students? How is it a bad thing to make sure all students have an equitable experience? How is wanting all students to feel valued and included a bad thing? It's not pie. Including all does not take away from any one group. Critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion are not the same thing. This worry about teaching children critical race theory in K-12 students is absurd. First of all, the chairs of DEI committee have made very clear that there is no intention of changing the curriculum to include it. Secondly, it is a concept being studied by law professors and academics across the country about how policy and laws intersect with race, not something that children or most adults have the ability to understand. The one thing that CRT discusses that we must do is stop teaching lies and have truths, and adopt a curriculum that is truthful, inclusive of other races and ethnicities. The history of this country is dark. Slavery, the Trail of Tears, the Japanese internment camps, the Jim Crow years were brutal, and we should be ashamed. But omission does not make these things any less true. There's a famous quote, "Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it," and we are here. Kids in cages at our borders are reminiscent of the internment camps. We must teach truths, we must call out wrongs, and we must not allow racism and discrimination anywhere near our children. Words like propaganda should never be used to describe DEI initiatives. We cannot allow the mental well-being of our children to suffer because we are politicizing things that are not political. I have been an advocate for underrepresented children for 20 years, and I will make it my mission to ensure that every student, no matter their gender, gender identity, race, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, or ability, feels safe, welcome, and valued in our school. DEI saves lives.
My name's David Jenkins, 160 North River Road. Tonight I'm going to be talking about my experiences in the Stowe schools and why DEI is necessary. To start off, I've been in Stowe schools my entire life, and I've seen too many cases of racism, microaggressions, and biases. All of this started happening at Lakeview. For instance, I was called a racial slur, and instead of it being handled correctly and the kid being punished correctly, he got off with a warning, like he just said a swear word. They're not the same thing. Racial slurs and swear words are not the same thing, and they should not be confused. Another thing, us people of color are not taught our history. We've only been taught slavery and the most popular social justice people, workers. We are not taught Latin culture, we're not taught Asian culture, we're only taught whitewashed culture that you guys seem to spew out and have no problem with. The reason we need DEI is to fix these issues, and the fact that you guys are even considering getting rid of it shows your ignorance and privilege. People that look like me do not feel welcome in your schools. You should care about that.
Almost hate to talk after that. My
Your
name's
name,
Doug Robinson. I'm at 4035 Red Wing Trail. I'm a husband of 35 years, a father of 5, 2 of which are black, and a grandfather to 5. We're the proud parents of a 2021 graduate from Stow-Munroe Falls and have recently withdrawn our 2 youngest black sons from this district. I had an epiphany, kind of an aha moment several years ago that informs everything I understand about parenting my boys in the culture in which we live. When we adopted our sons from Ethiopia, they were just boys, typical boys. Bringing them here to the U.S., to Stow, they're black boys. That distinction, though probably lost on many of us here, it was lost on me, is profound and it informs everything about our lives together and here in Stow. I'm here reluctantly to speak to the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Stow-Munroe Falls School District specifically and within the community in general. I say reluctantly, but please don't misunderstand that. I'm not reluctant to speak because I'm not convinced that there are significant issues in Stow, particularly racial inequalities and inclusivity. That much is undeniable. I'm not reluctant to speak because I am conflict averse. I love a good fight. Just ask my wife. I'm reluctantly speaking because despite my life experiences, parenting for 32 years, 11 of which of parenting black boys from hard places, I believe I need to be a listener and a learner first, rather than expressing my thoughts or opinions. And that is what I've been doing over the past several years, listening and trying to actually hear what others experience. People different than me, different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, religious beliefs, trying to understand what it's like for others, from others' perspectives in our community and our schools. And I've had a front row seat with our boys and seen everything from racial biases to outright hostile racism levied toward them. Racial injustice and inequality have come to the forefront in our country, in our community, not seen since the Civil Rights Movement. And in that climate, I have observed this school board attempt to minimize, sidestep, and downplay the scope and magnitude of these issues. Black Lives Matter as a statement of value and inclusivity is still problematic for some on this board. Some still think that these are political issues rather than civil rights issues, and continue to push forward the idea that these are not issues that the school board should be addressing. Did you say 30 seconds? Thank you. Recently, I reviewed a video in which Ms. Johnson-Bowers encouraged Mr. Feldman on the issue of sports, coaching, leadership development. I want to make sure you feel free to really reach. Mediocre is not okay. And even though it seems like pie in the sky, if we don't aim incredibly high, then we're not going anywhere. And that's not acceptable for us here in Stow. I say to that, I agree wholeheartedly. Mediocre is not okay. And in the area of race, equality, diversity, and inclusivity, we're not mediocre here in Stow. We're failing.
thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marcus Strenkowski. I currently reside at 2529 Whitelaw Street in Cuyahoga Falls, and I am a former graduate of Stow-Munroe Falls. I came here today to show my support for the DEI and kind of go through like some of my personal times here. Over the years, starting from kindergarten, I've noticed that kids used to make fun of me and point out, like, ask me questions such as, are you adopted? Because I came from an all-white household. I personally was not adopted, but I didn't know the term back then. And I'd say yes because I just wanted to fit in, thinking it was a good thing. But at the end of the day, they would just laugh at me. Fast forward to Kimpton, I had a teacher there call me Brillo Pad because of my long hair at that time. And then once I came to the high school, I just kept my head down at that time because there was multiple fights at Stow High School because a white student called a black student the N-word or just directed that phrase towards them. And at one point, there was a group of white kids right after 9/11 went up to a Muslim kid and told him another kid called him a terrorist just for their amusement. And I tried to, and back then that like really irked me because it's just like, why would you do that? And then throughout my 4 years there was 2 suicides of 2 black students. And mostly that was because they were being bullied. And I feel if there was some sort of curriculum like this back then, this could have saved them. And that's what it really does. I'm sorry, I'm not good at speeches much. But at the end of the day, I came here in support of those that have kids of color in this community currently, like my friends that moved here a year and a half ago, that are going to have 2 kids hopefully here in the future, even when it's time to maybe get a better house. I'm here to just show my support for those that have been helping push this forward, like Miss Nancy Brown and Aisha Collier. And at the end of the day, I would like to call an action to the board, because I know there's people on here that are silently for DEI, but they're too afraid to be vocal out loud because of the backlash. And at the end of the day, silence is compliance. And then you are now falling in line with the words that were spoken last month. And if you are truly scared or not understanding what DEI is for, I think it's time that you take a look at yourself and see if you should be removed from this board by yourself or by the voters. Because at this time, there's nothing else that's going to do to help this community without this education, because at home, hate is bred.
30
And if it's not broken there through education, when will it be? Because then you just start to foster this and find others with that same kind of hate in their heart. And at the end of the day, I just want to say thank you for this time.
I am Anidra Jones, 1809B Higbee Drive, Stow, Ohio. DEI is critical to the lives of Stow-Munroe Falls kids. It is a committee aimed at embracing diversity while providing a sustained commitment to equity and inclusion by building meaningful relationships with everyone in the Bulldog community. I repeat, everyone in the Bulldog community. As you have heard from people who spoke before me, many Black students, particularly Black boys, are suffering through their days at SMF schools because of their racial identity. They do not feel safe, welcomed, or included in the school community. And to avoid the fate of the student or students that we lost in the early 2000s to suicide, their parents would rather remove them from our district. This is unacceptable. It is the responsibility of all of us as members of the Bulldog community, school board members, administrators, faculty, staff, parents, and residents, to ensure that such a tragedy does not befall another SMF student. Anyone sitting on this board who does not believe the protection of my children, of all of our children, is not part of their duty should resign today. What is happening in our schools is no laughing matter. This board and its members should individually and collectively support the work of the DEI committee to celebrate the diversity that exists in our community and world, to create pathways to understanding through curriculum and professional development, and to generate an equitable environment that will hold staff and students accountable for bringing necessary changes to the district. The curricular changes are not intended to indoctrinate the students or the teachers, but to tell the truth about the history of this country and its founding, and the biases that exist in all subject areas because of the white supremacist lens through which education has been filtered. The aim is to create educated and informed alumni who can think critically about the world around them and who can become tomorrow's engaged citizens. For these reasons, you all should support the DEI. DEI saves lives.
Faith Robinson, 4035 Red Wing Trail. I'm reading a letter from my friend Melissa. Good evening. In 2003, my friend George took his own life. He was 14. One of the reasons we know George took his life was bullying he faced at Stow High School. He was relentlessly bullied for being Black. Let me say this again. He was only 14. The school did nothing in 2003 to protect my friend. If they had maybe, he would be here. In the summer of 2020, George's friend wrote a letter to the school regarding their shared experience in Stow.
This is where Lisa Johnson Bowers is caught laughing countless times. She was caught laughing while friends who knew and
I'm
loved
sorry,
George.
it has to be to the board as a whole. It can't be with regard to an individual. Thank you.
In 15 years, Stow has not changed. Black children are still suffering at the hands of our district. George had an amazing smile and personality. He was so smart and talented. He had an amazing sense of humor. He was simply amazing. He should still be here today. Stow needs a diversity, inclusivity, and equity committee because racism still plagues these halls like it did in 2003. By supporting DEI, we can save lives. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monica Robinson, and my address is 4035 Red Wing Trail. I am reading a letter from an alumni. She's a teacher and didn't want to give out her address. I just want to thank you, Nancy. I listened to your speech at the board meeting and I cried. I really appreciate the work that you do and for fighting for what is right. I was a Stow graduate. I am half Chinese, and although I had amazing teachers and had a really good education, I was bullied all throughout. I was called derogatory names. I was asked if I ate dog. In the 3rd grade, there was a little girl in my class who told the other girls in the class not to be friends with me because I was a chink. On the bus, there was an older boy who bullied me relentlessly. He spit in my face, told me he was going to kill me, and pulled a gun on my sister when she was playing outside. Every day on the bus, I had to deal with this. I lived in fear. My sister lived in fear. I was afraid to tell anyone as I was threatened by the bullies. I never told my parents while in school because I did not want them to worry about my safety on the school bus and while at school. This is why I think including diversity in the school is needed. Bullying stopped when I got home in my safe place. This generation has social media, texting, etc. These kids cannot escape bullying. It's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can't imagine, even with my experiences, what these students of color are going through. My daughter goes to Stow. I love how diverse her classes have been. She is able to be friends and be in class with all different nationalities and races. It warms my heart. And although I am grateful for diversity, I am saddened that students are being bullied and to not feel included. We need to educate our children, our future, on diversity and how to be accepting of others. Shame on the school board members who are against educating our students on diversity and inclusion. Our country is a melting pot, and we need to love and accept everyone's differences. I'd also like to know why June of 2020's YouTube videos were down. I'd like to know who gave that approval. Does anybody know? Is that a question that can be answered, why those were removed?
We'll look into it and get back to you.
I would like an answer to that. Thank you.
I'm Pastor Ginger Bakos, and I live at 544 Fairchild Avenue in Kent. I have a son in Stow-Munroe Falls Schools, and I'm the Associate Pastor of Youth and Family Life at the Beth Church. DEI is critical to the lives of Stow-Munroe Falls Schools kids. Until such a time that it is not mandatory for children to be in school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, their lives and well-being are absolutely the responsibility of the schools. Between 1991 and 2017, suicide attempts among Black adolescents increased by 73%, while attempts by white students decreased. According to the American Psychological Association, Black youth face increased depression, anxiety, and PTSD that is significantly increased by exposure to racial discrimination, racially motivated verbal abuse, and physical violence. LGBT youth are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual and cisgender peers. Having just one adult who affirms and accepts them decreases their risk of suicide by 40%. Suicide preventions like You Matter are pointless if they do not ever adequately address youth suicide prevention that addresses the disparity in suicide attempts among Black, brown, and LGBTQ youth. It is your job on that board to not just give lip service to the work of DEI, but accept the responsibility of what the consequences will be for bigoted action and espousing bigoted ideas that harm our kids. This board has to reckon with the things that they've done that signal unwillingness to support the DEI and our students. We can't thank board or school members who were forced to resign over racist tirades. We can't be unwilling to pay attention when people are telling gut-wrenching stories of racism in SMF schools. We can't be people who make space or support people who call Muslims terrorists and Mexicans drug dealers. We can't, as board members, say blatantly racist things, whether it's to other board members privately or publicly. This board must decide where it stands. These kids' lives are literally at stake.
30 seconds.
Make a commitment to discuss DEI every board meeting. Make a commitment to actively outline consequences for espousing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and hate. Or get out of the way and make space for people who are willing to step in and do it, because DEI saves lives.
I'm not sure I want to go after that. My name is Pamela Wind. I reside at 4558 Chatwood Drive in Stow. DEI is critically important to the lives of Stow-Munroe Falls students. During the last meeting, one board member invited the other members of the board to express that Black lives do in fact matter in SMF schools, and to take direct action to support the broader inclusion mission of our DEI committee, such as including DEI-related metrics in the superintendent's evaluation and working on DEI at monthly board work meetings. Sadly, the response of this board was to sidetrack the conversation into defense of themselves and other irrelevant items, rather than make this commitment to the actual work of inclusion. One board member who did not meet with the chairs of the DEI committee even called discussing bias in the classroom propaganda to the press immediately after the meeting. We have heard throughout the last year about the negative mental health consequences of race-based and other biases in our schools, and we have continued to hear tonight about students who do not feel safe attending our schools. Let me be clear, it is this board's job to do their best to ensure that students feel safe and included. Do your job. Support diversity, equity, and inclusion through your words and your actions. Do your job. DEI saves lives.
Hello. Terry Ionetta, 3959 Cardinal Circle, and I'm using my time to talk about critical race theory. Increasing numbers of Americans are acknowledging the fact that critical race theory is dangerous, and if allowed to continue to infest our institutions, especially our schools, it will rip America to pieces. America will become a place destroyed by the obsessive focus on racial distinctions, which is divisive, demeaning, and proposes lasting damage to both children and communities. This can no longer stay under the radar and in the shadows, as our children are being led and instructed to acknowledge their white privilege. We all have flaws that can be embellished to destroy each of us. And critical race theory is even more destructive, as you can be destroyed for sins you never committed. This is a radical agenda upending basic norms of the American culture. Karl Marx believed in class conflict, and primary characteristic of industrial societies was the imbalance of power between capitalists and workers, the oppressors and the oppressed. During the 20th century, a number of regimes underwent Marxist-style revolutions, and each ended in disaster. Socialist governments in the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, Cuba, Rwanda, and elsewhere racked up a body count of nearly 100 million of their own people. It has been injected into government agencies, public school systems, teacher training programs, and corporate human resource departments under the guise of diversity training, human resources modules, public policy frameworks, and school curricula. Equity sounds non-threatening and is easily confused with equality. Equality, the principle defined in the Declaration of Independence, defended in the Civil War and codified into law with the 14th and 15th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, is explicitly rejected by critical race theorists. In contrast to equality, equity is little more than reformulated Marxism. It proposes suspending private property rights, individual rights, federalism,
30 seconds.
Freedom of speech, seizing land and wealth, and redistributing them along racial lines. A proposed federal Department of Anti-Racism would be unaccountable to the elected branches of government and would have the power to nullify, veto, or abolish any law at any level of government and curtail the speech of political leaders and others who are deemed insufficiently anti-racist. History is what has happened in the past. It cannot be changed. Good, bad, or indifferent. We learn it, accept it, and teach it. Genuine
That's 3
American
minutes.
history is rich and with stories of achievements and,
I'm sorry, that's 3 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Before we move on, I have a point of order and a motion. Our board policy limits public comment to 15 minutes. I would ask the board in a motion to extend that time period to allow all of the people currently standing, but no one else. I would ask that as a motion at this time.
Any seconds?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Bettio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Sunny Matthews. I live in Cuyahoga Falls. I'm here today because I'm a diversity and inclusion trainer who has been doing your job for way too long. You see, diversity, equity, and inclusion will save the lives of students in Stow-Munroe Falls. I know it because your lack of care to these students has forced me to pick up your slack. I have to help those here dealing with the trauma and pain caused by insensitive comments, extra aggression, and general physical attacks in your school system. Every student should feel safe and be heard. Race, class, gender, and sexuality should not make you a target. But if it does, then the adults who care for you, including this board, should step up and protect you. There is a simple solution to a very hard problem. Do your job. Encourage and support teachers. Support the diversity and equity work happening here in Stow. If we are not actively teaching students to appreciate, then we are allowing them to hate. Take a moment to think about the students of colors, the girls, and the LGBTQ students in your district. You cannot ignore this truth. These students, their parents, and the teachers have been very vocal. Still has a problem. Being a student is hard enough. We should shower love and support on the kids in this district. This is not about home training. Take off your rose-colored glasses, look outside of yourself, think about others. Kids are in danger because you failed to act, and I am tired of picking up your slack. I have to sit with the parents as they decide whether to tell the school that the N-word was thrown at their kids on the football field. I have to sit with kids as they send me emails, and I have to listen to them on the phone as they discuss that all they know about themselves as black people is that they were once enslaved. I have to listen to people, LGBTQ students, who have been pushed into lockers simply because they wore a pride flag. I am listening to the trauma of teachers and students on a weekly basis in your school system. Their pain and their trauma is injuring them and this community. And all you have to do is respond and act, and you will allow these students to thrive. Let's be honest with ourselves, because I'm sick and tired of doing the work for you. You can do this. All we are asking you to do is to attend a diversity and equity event yourself. Before you doubt it, try it. Then after you try it, and you sit down and you talk to us, because I'm not a big bad wolf, but then after you try it and you sit down and you think about it and work with it, I'm sure you will understand this is not a big bad wolf. Because I promise you two things today. I am sick and tired of doing your job, but I will continue to do it. Most importantly, I will do everything in my power to make sure people vote you out if you don't do the right thing. You see, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it saves lives.
My name is Sarah Ashley Cook. I live at 2195 Talmadge Road, Ravenna, Ohio 44266. My son, Gavin Lee Harris, is a student in open enrollment at Stow-Munroe Falls High School. He will be entering the 11th grade. Let me start off my statement with one very important thing. I fully believe that DEI is critical to the lives of Stow-Munroe Falls students, that it can in fact save their lives. When we moved to Stow, I fully believed that this school understood and was committed to that belief, so much so that when we moved to Brimfield, it was one of the reasons we kept him in this district. We are beyond upset and angry to discover that is not the case. A realization that came at the expense of the life of a 14-year-old boy, a boy who was left completely unprotected by this district, along with other children who are still left unprotected by this district. As you can see on my shirt is the word ignorance, and that word has been crossed out. I choose this word because I fully believe that ignorance is the root of hate, discrimination, and racism. That has always been my belief that a school is where you go to turn ignorance into knowledge. That through the gaining of knowledge, you can destroy ignorance, hate, racism, and discrimination. That there is no better place to learn these lessons than at school, where you will be with other children who are not like you. However, that is not going to happen if you are not given the knowledge that these things are wrong. Something that can only happen if schools make an effort to have a place for everyone, where all voices are given a chance to be heard. For that knowledge, schools must have diversity, equality, and inclusion for all of the students. This includes if they are male, female, transgendered, or non-binary, straight, or part of the LGBTQA community. It includes the students of different races, ethnicities, religions, abilities, and countries of origin. They all need a voice and a place. They all need to feel safe in school. This is how you teach empathy, compassion, and understanding. Lessons that can be uncomfortable. That discomfort serves a purpose. Very important one. That discomfort is understanding. With understanding comes empathy. With empathy comes compassion.
30 seconds.
These are the types of knowledge that defeat ignorance, racism, hate, and discrimination. As to the question of whether children are too young to learn these lessons, let me make something perfectly clear. If there are children who are born old enough to bear the burden of racism, discrimination, ignorance, and hate, then other children are old enough to learn why it is wrong. They are old enough to learn the history of the struggle of minorities and women, to know what has been done to them, to learn so that they can have empathy, compassion, and understanding, and so they can stand with their fellow students to change the world
I'm sorry,
for the better.
that's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Josh Case, 315 East Grant Street, Kent. DEI is critical to the lives of our Stow-Munroe Falls school kids. Hello, my name is Josh Case. I grew up in Stow and graduated from Stow-Munroe Falls High School in 1998. I grew up in a very religious home, the kind where we went to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and we didn't have much choice in the matter. When I was about 10 years old, my parents made the choice to start going to a new church. This church was in Akron, and its demographics were about 95% African American. Growing up in Stow, and up to that point only attending white churches, the transition felt uncomfortable to me. I didn't know it at the time, but my parents' decision would be a gift to me. At first, some of my discomfort was due to the fact that I had never been in a situation where I was a racial minority. This ended up being a gift. I had to adjust to different cultural customs. This was a gift. I had to adjust to another culture's music. This was a gift. In the pastor's sermons, I got to experience a different perspective on issues of the day, and those perspectives did not center me or my comfort. This was a gift. I received love, acceptance, and plenty of hugs. This was a gift. I had an opportunity to see the humanity of my brothers and sisters of color and what makes us exactly the same. And yet, I saw how society was structured in a way that made us live very different lives. This was a gift. When another white kid inevitably made a racial joke or racial slur, which I heard often growing up in Stow, my time spent with another culture helped give me the strength to push back. This was a gift. I had the opportunity to see tears fall from the eyes of people I respected as they recalled their racial trauma. This was a gift. I am a better man because of the diversity I've had in my life. Now, there may be those in the Stow-Munroe Falls community that feel that emphasizing diversity, equity, inclusion might make white kids uncomfortable, that having students think about race might be awkward or a burden. But you are not giving students a burden, you are giving them a gift. DEI is a gift to our students, and DEI saves lives.
I'm Sarah Heron, 2631 Lermitage Place. I'm reading this letter on behalf of Carrie Suladolnik at 4263 Meadowlark Trail in Stow. I regret that I cannot attend in person, but I thought it was important that my voice be heard. I thank the DEI committee for their work thus far. While I stand shoulder to shoulder with my Black peers and peers of color as an ally in the fight against systemic racism, I also want to bring attention to some other aspects of DEI. My household is a diverse household. We are interfaith. We are neurodiverse. We are members of the LGBTQ community. We are persons with disabilities. These are all things that I may have shied away from publicly stating as recently as last year, but I have found my voice and I no longer wish to remain in the periphery. All students deserve a safe place to learn, grow, and be authentic. All students deserve to have educators and administrators who understand that sound DEI policies, practices, and resources correlate with effective teaching and learning environments. All students deserve a community that understands that fostering an environment of acceptance and opportunity creates positive student outcomes. I implore you as members of this Board of Education, as administrators, as community members, to not only continue the work that you have begun, but to expand. It's not always obvious who is in need of being told they are welcomed, loved, and included. Inclusion is the best way to teach acceptance and to empower all students to celebrate their diversity. Thank you.
I'm Claudia Keating, 4038 Leawood Road in Stow. My comment is primarily in response to those, including some of our own board members, who may believe it's not the place of teachers to educate children on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our public education system as we know it owes a debt to John Dewey. It was his belief that schools should mirror a social environment and that children learn best in natural social settings. He was a staunch supporter of participation in meaningful activity as well as democracy within the classroom, as opposed to authoritarian teachers and rote learning. If you peek in any Stow-Munroe Falls classroom, you will see the influence of his principles alive and well. Our schools should be preparing our children to be good, humane, inclusive members of society, and most of the time they already are doing that. From what I've seen from my children's 6 years in the school district in Stow classrooms, their teachers are trying their very best to do just that. They're including all of the children. They're doing their best. School is so much more than the 3 R's, because society that we are so determined to prepare our little kids for is so much more than that. To quote teacher Tom Hobson, an early childhood educator, international speaker, and education consultant, the purpose of education in a democracy ought to be to prepare children for their role as citizens, and that means they learn to think for themselves, that they ask a lot of questions, that they question authority, that they stand up for what they believe in, and that they understand that their contribution to the world cannot be measured in money. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ross Widener. I live at 540 Belmont Park Drive in Monroe Falls, and I'm here to speak my support for the DE&I committee. I think that we don't often talk enough about the benefits of DE&I to everyone, not just people who are within minority groups. Excuse me. In a study published in the Journal of Child Development, showed that students felt safer, less victimized, less lonely, and more fairly treated, not only within minority groups, but across all of students. And I think we don't talk about those things enough. Also, a study from the University of Geneva has showed improved math and reading scores where there's more diverse student population after controlling for other predicting factors, not just within the minority groups, but across all of the students. Businesses are also recognizing the value of diversity. According to consulting firm Cloverpop, diverse teams make better business decisions 87% of the time. And according to McKinsey & Company, companies are 25% more likely to be in the top quartile of financial performance when they have diverse leadership. Given that fact, we'd be doing students a great disservice to not properly prepare them to participate in a diverse workforce and society. So not only does DE&I save lives, it makes lives better for everybody. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Clark, 2291 East Gilwood Drive. The most important thing that our kids can learn in the beginning doesn't come from schools, it comes from us parents. Respect, self-respect, and self-confidence. I was raised in a very diverse family. My family's diverse, my 4 kids. I don't look at anybody's children and say, oh, those are your black children. I don't do that. Those are your children.
I'm sorry, your comments should be directed to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Those are your children. I heard the gentleman say his black sons. Those are his sons, period. Simple as that, But when you teach your children to respect, you teach them to respect everyone, no matter what they look like. And then have self-respect. When they look at themselves, they can say, hey, I'm fair to everybody. I live in a very diverse neighborhood. I love it. My neighbors are great. I know them all. A lot of them know me, maybe not by name, but by sight. The school system has a job to do too. It's to educate our children, teach them math and science and all the things that go along with it. I feel sorry for children that come to school and they're bullied. I was bullied a little bit in school too. I was the smallest kid in school. I was also a year younger than most kids in my class. But that's where the self-confidence comes in. I knew that if I worked at it, as I made myself better and my friends, and pick and choose your friends wisely, But like I said, it comes down to respecting everybody. It shouldn't matter because I don't say my black friends, my Asian friends, my gay friends. They're my friends. They're my friends, and they'll always be my friends. And people here, like I said, teach your children to respect everybody. Respect everybody, no matter what they look like, where they come from. That's the most important thing. It starts at home with the parents. We're never going to be able to rely on the school to do everything for our children. There's just no way. It's impossible. It starts at home, starts with the parents. So all of us parents here, you need to teach your children to respect everybody else. Even if somebody has a different opinion, I can agree to disagree with anybody as long as you're telling me how you feel honestly from your heart. I can understand that. Growing up, my family belonged to a thing called Friendly Town, where we would bring kids from the city out to our house in the summer, and it was great because to me it was just more people to play ball with. It didn't matter if they looked like me or not. It was just somebody to play ball with. It was great. My parents taught us service, and I continue that with myself with what I do, and so does my family. And like I said, I come from a very diverse family. Anyway, I'll be done. I'll just say thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Hello.
My name is Miguel Carvalho. I'm a 2005 graduate from Stowe, and I used to do senior and junior class plays right from this very stage. A year ago, I wrote a letter to the school board demanding the acknowledgement of the Black Lives Matter movement. A year ago, fellow alumni also began to make their voices heard, as our nation's traumatic summer of 2020 and the continuation of abuse and murder of Black lives reminded us of our time as students of color at Stowe High School. A year ago, you read those letters and said they were moving, touching, and even made you second guess if everything is actually as accepting and kind in the schools as you may think it is. A year ago, I began hearing the same story from my fellow alumni. Stowe sucked, and I couldn't wait to get out. I know very few proud bulldogs that bleed maroon and gold. I know many people who have their time at Stowe schools be tied to their identities in ways that they wish were different, ways that were less cruel and dehumanizing. I want to be proud of what my hometown is doing to be actively anti-racist and inclusive, and that's why I joined the Stowe DEI General Assembly. The community needs to know that what they are doing is exactly what I wished we had when I attended school here. A multifaceted Black History Month celebration, hosting book clubs on race with parents, students, and staff, updating elementary libraries with books that deliberately celebrate diversity and inclusion. All students can benefit from widening their perspectives on race and confronting the ugliness that can stalk these hallways. Stowe DEI has canvassed families and students, and the experiences of families of color show there is a real need for their work to be applied in all of Stowe schools. The members of the DEI are your pastors, your mayor, your teachers, your coaches, and your police officers. To think that the efforts of the DEI are supported by these community members in itself is wonderful and a great start to real change. Stowe needs to be a safe place for its students, especially students of color, to feel seen, valued, and respected. Stowe DEI is making steps to ensure that that happens, and I hope that leads to a new generation of graduates that don't want to just leave and never look back, but can feel like these schools and the young people they produce are open-minded example setters, change makers, and not continue to be embroiled in racial divisiveness. I couldn't tell you where my high school diploma is. It's probably in a box next to a stack of board games and dress-up clothes. But what I can tell you is my very first tattoo. It's about the size of that clock right there, and it's right here in the center of my back. It shows a picture of an angel on his knees crying, and it was drawn by my best friend Brian on the back of a funeral pamphlet from my friend George. It ends with us and Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dina Weber. I'm at 2907 East Celeste View Drive in Stowe. I'd like to, I'm against this training, this DEI. First, let me say that bullying of any kind, whether a person is targeted because of their race, religion, sexuality, disability, or anything else, is abhorrent. Bullying is never okay. In our student conduct codes, we have rules against bullying, discrimination, and harassment. Are these rules not being followed? What will this training teach our students? Will it teach that the color of their skin defines them? Does it teach white students that they are inbred with a systemic racism that they never knew about and that they should feel ashamed? Does it teach people of color that they will be forever victims? Will it and always be oppressed? Will this create a divisive atmosphere within our schools?
Audience, please keep your comments. Thank you.
Will this training be injected into the curriculum, and what is the content of the information taught to our students? Who will be teaching these programs, and will they be properly trained? In February of this year, Coca-Cola came under fire for these types of trainings. The training that was conducted was not in line with the original purpose or intent of the program. The trainers took material out of context. They made accusatory statements towards white people, even urging them to be less white. Less white. This training that was supposed to bridge understanding between the races instead caused people to feel targeted, embarrassed, and angry. This training caused more division. This was adults in this training. Is this what we want for our children? Do you want our children to feel these things? I already had a teacher at this school tell my child that it was unfortunate that he was being raised by constitutional conservatives. We have a board member that made snide comments about people who fly a Gadsden flag and Republicans on social media. And I'm supposed to trust these types of people to teach diversity and inclusion? How about focus on education? Teach them to read, teach them math, teach them unedited history. Yes, there are parts of history that are horrible, uncomfortable, but we need to teach these things with an understanding that it was horrible and that it should never happen again. I need teachers to teach subjects so that these kids can be contributing members of our society. I don't need them to teach morals. That's my job as a parent.
Tammy Weaver, 1925 Maple Road. I'm here today because I'm appalled by the lack of transparency by this board to inform parents of the hidden agenda that has been transpiring behind closed doors, which they have not been made privy to concerning the education, or should I say the indoctrination of their children into Marxism. Call it CRT, call it DEI, call it whatever you want. A spade is a spade. The teachings of Marxism do one thing: they divide. And it doesn't matter what terms you use: proletariat versus bourgeoisie, oppressed versus oppressor, black versus white, collectivism versus individualism. Division is a goal. I absolutely have no doubt that you believe what you're saying. It's not a mistake nor a misunderstanding. Of course, you will never ever concede that your theory is Marxist. You're smarter than that, and we all expect your full repudiation of that fact. In the Declaration of Independence, how did our forefathers oppose invasions of the rights of the people with manly firmness? How many citizens of this district are willing to oppose with manly firmness this abomination that's disguised itself as an innocuous, inoffensive, and enlightening theory? How many parents here will stand up and oppose the indoctrination of our children with manly firmness, the way our founding fathers opposed the tyranny of England? In conclusion, to the parents, my advice is, in this district, if at all possible, until those within this board that promote Marxism are replaced, or CRT, DEI, or whatever other deceptive description of Marxism is defeated by House Bill 227, remove your children from the public school system. Send them to private schools whose curriculum does not include the indoctrination of Marxism, or homeschool if that is all possible. But do something to eliminate the destruction of the American ideals of opportunity, equality, and limitless success through personal responsibility and struggle. In conclusion, to the board, those of you promoting Marxism, you should be removed and hopefully never allowed to hold any position in the education of children again. You will be stopped now because you're raping the minds of our youth, from the innocence of kindergarten through the emotional turbulence of the teen years. There is no saving you. Your indoctrination is complete. You hate the ideals of this country, and that manifests itself in your actions and your bitter, loathsome tirades on social media against the good citizens of this district and the parents of the children whom you want to victimize. You have taken the honor and privilege of trust in the education of our children and twisted it into the hate-filled power that you want to wield as you wish. These parents will oppose you with every breath left in them. You have become like a political parasitic disease, but now the body is awake. These parents see you for what you are and will act like the body's immune system, coming to attack and annihilate that which endangers the health in the future. Your promotion of Marxism will be your political undoing. God be with us all, even you, for the sleeping lion is awake.
Mary Mumper, 4242 Heil Road, Stow. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is critical race theory. Critical race theory arose in Germany as a Marxist position at the Frankfurt School. In 1933, members of the Frankfurt School came to the United States. Many of these Marxists formed their headquarters at Columbia University. The critical race theory's components of diversity, equity, not equality,
and inclusion are teaching our children to examine themselves to see if they are tainted with whiteism. They are being taught to despise their country, their race, their upbringing. In addition, some people advocating CRT are also advocating for Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter founder Patrice Cullors is a self-described Marxist. You know what? We need to teach our children history. Critical race theory is divisive, undermines our Constitution and freedom. Our children should be taught about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which is codified in the 14th and 15th Amendment. These uphold equality, not equity, which is redistribution of wealth. Equality was advocated by Martin Luther King Jr. and upheld the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act of 1964. By advocating DEI, you are advocating to teach our children a communist doctrine when you should be advocating teaching American history, civics. Critical race theory is clearly unconstitutional, harmful to all children, and the future of America. Any person that advocates teaching critical race theory to our children is violating our Constitution and the oath that you took to uphold the Constitution. In addition, if you are supporting this, you are violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Our children need to learn their history, and so do you, because anyone who doesn't know their history, you will come back to regret it, just as happened in Germany and every other communist country. Thank you.
Rebecca Alexander, 187 Fox Run Drive, Monroe Falls, Ohio. I want to start out by saying good evening. Thank you for taking this time to hear from us. We have heard powerful and incredible stories from students and alums of color, and I can't offer anything nearly as powerful. So based on some of the things that I've heard in the past few minutes, I'm making some quick edits to what I was going to say. And I want to address the people on the board and the people in the room who are afraid of this curriculum. And I want to do that by addressing how my own education failed me by not learning this. I want to start out by saying I'm grateful for so much of my education. I really am. I learned Latin under Mr. McCaffrey. How many people can say that? I learned how to write effectively under Mrs. Colligan, a skill that not only took me to college, but helped me become an author. I learned from Mr. Putka how to be confident, how to be myself, how to be dramatic, how to stand in front of a room full of people who may not like what I have to say and say it confidently. But there were also gaps in my education. There were ways that my education failed me, and I'm saying this to all the parents in the room who are so afraid of learning this. When I got a scholarship to go to Brazil and people asked me how I was going to wash my clothes, I couldn't answer, because I hadn't learned literally anything about Latin America. It was embarrassing, quite frankly, to show up to one of the third largest city in the world with a subway system comparable to New York City, not knowing how I was going to wash my clothes. I remember actually my friends making jokes if I'd wash my clothes in the river, because we didn't know. We didn't understand how developed Brazil was. And when I met people from other countries, I learned that my Midwestern education at Stow-Munroe Falls left me behind my peers in terms of global knowledge. And I'm saying this to the parents in the room, you don't want your children to go out in the world and be ignorant. It's embarrassing. It's failing them. When I returned from Brazil, I went to Kent State. My roommate was black, and again, I realized the gap in my education when I didn't know what Juneteenth was. I had never even heard of Juneteenth, actually. One of the most important days in Black history and American history, and I couldn't have told you anything about Black history. It was embarrassing. It was, again, a reminder that my education had failed me. I didn't go out in the world and say that I was proud of my education. I was embarrassed, and I had to educate myself. So in summation, I support diversity curriculum. All of the parents in the room should support diversity curriculum if you want your children to be successful. And the people on the board, if you want to raise citizens that are compassionate and kind and smart and can walk in the world and be good people, we have to have diversity curriculum. By keeping this knowledge from them, you are failing them. End of story. Thank you.
Rachel Jameson, 2187 West 95th Street, Cleveland, Ohio, 44102. Last year, the Board of Education put out a statement in support of the work that the DEI is doing in the district. The board acknowledged that as a predominantly white school district, they had not been sufficiently mindful of the discrimination, both intentional and unintentional, that non-white students and staff face on a daily basis. The board stated that this was a priority for them. The board committed to protecting staff, students, and families from discrimination and producing real change for them. The board stated they would avoid becoming embroiled in divisiveness. Well, here we are, a year later. What happened? What happened to the support you expressed last year? What happened to acknowledging the discrimination that non-white students and staff face on a daily basis? Now it's, we're all Americans. 99.9% of people are good. Now that it's time for the work to be done, for the action plans to go into place, where is your support? The DEI initiative has done the work. They've collected the data, they have listened to the community, and they have put together the action plans. Now there are people on the board who are questioning their work, who think their work and their plans are not necessary. Where did the support that you publicly announced last year go? You said in your statement last year that words without action are meaningless. Well, it's time now for the action, and what we're getting are words. You said you would avoid being embroiled in divisiveness, but you're dividing the board by withdrawing the support you pledged. Now is not the time to remain silent, neutral, or complacent. Last year, you embraced the opportunity to support your student population. Well, this is your opportunity. Supporting the work of the DEI is supporting your student population. I'm a Stow-Munroe Falls alumni, and I lived in Stow for the first 22 years of my life. So much has remained unchanged. I remember as a child attending the funeral of one of the boys in my brother's Boy Scout troop, who was failed in the worst way by the Stow-Munroe Falls School District. He took his life after being bullied relentlessly for being Black. I remember watching my brother being ridiculed for being Hispanic, constantly being referred to as Mexican, having teachers refuse to call him by his name because it sounded Hispanic, watching my own teachers single out students of color in my classrooms. And I hear stories from parents and community members today about experiencing these same interactions and these same inequalities, which have these same potentially deadly consequences. The racism hasn't stopped, the bullying hasn't stopped, the suicide attempts and long-term mental health consequences of being a student of color in this district haven't stopped. What has changed? Now there's a capable group of people who have the expertise, who have put the work in, and want to continue to put the work in, who are trying to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to this district and community. Ms. Bedio has signaled clearly that she does not value their work to make all students feel accepted, respected, valued, and safe in this district. And Ms. Brown has been the lone voice on the board,
I'm sorry,
urging
your
her
comments need
colleagues
to be to the board, not to
to
individuals.
actively support the DEI in a meaningful way. Last year, we had your support. What happened?
I'm just going to remind those who remain to speak, please address the entire board. Thank you.
Neil Hess, 4113 Osage Street. It's clear to me that there are efforts aimed at indoctrinating Stowe school children with some of the most toxic and anti-American theories ever conceived, pushing a vision of America that casts our history, culture, traditions, and founding documents in the most negative possible light, and now it's in our great community. They will sit here and tell you that DEI is not critical race theory, in the same way they insist that democratic socialism isn't communism with sprinkles on top. Allow me to decode some of the rhetoric. When they say diversity, what they mean is an identity-based approach to society, which is a violation of individual identity, enforced political conformity, an attack on merit, and a soft form of bigotry. When they say inclusion, what they mean is attacking freedoms of association and speech by banning anything they find offensive. Excuse me?
I'm sorry, if we could have some decorum in the audience, please.
Yeah. And finally, the big one, equity. Not equality, equity. When they say equity, what they mean is equality of outcomes, which is a violation of equality before the law, a dismantling of the foundations of a free society, and a state management of society, including reparations. To quote President Donald Trump, instead of advancing the beautiful dream of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., that our children should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, the left's new theory preaches that by judging people by the color of their skin, it's actually a good idea. Teaching these divisive messages verge on psychological abuse,
Indoctrinating generations of children with these extreme ideas is not just immoral, it's a program for national suicide. And of course, that is what the Chardonnay Antifa and our Board of Education have endorsed. I speak here today on behalf of the parents too frightened to say anything publicly out of fear of being doxxed, harassed, suffering repercussions to their children's grades, and of course, the left's old standby of accusing anyone who disagrees with their anti-Americanism as racist. This is how mediocre people control societies, with the demand, go along or we'll punish you. And speaking of mediocre people, one of the most vocal of our school board was quoted in the Stow-Century saying people had better get used to saying Black Lives Matter. Again, we need to decode this. As a phrase, absolutely Black Lives Matter. All lives do. As a corporation, however, BLM Inc. stated they are a group that is openly Marxist. We are trained Marxists.
30
What is
seconds.
Marxism? Marxism is a political philosophy that focuses on class struggle in various ways to use the power of the state to force equality of outcome for all people. Sound familiar? I, for one, will not stand for this type of indoctrination. My kids are not your social experiment. If you need absolution for feeling some sort of guilt for an immutable characteristic of your body that God gave you, go see a therapist. Leave our kids out of it.
Ma'am, before you begin, sir, at the back of the line, I'm sorry, we closed comments with the two ladies so that we could continue. Yeah, thank you. Again, and I'll please remind everybody. No, sir, I'm sorry. And we'll remind everybody in line to please address the board as a whole and not individuals. Please go ahead.
My name is Linda Picarillo-Smith. I live at 175 Silver Valley in Monroe Falls. My children were students of Stow-Munroe Falls schools. And I'm an educator at Kent State, where I have actually taught a lot of Stow-Munroe Falls students. There's been a lot of information being shared. I think it's important, my recommendation to the board is to be able to separate facts from not facts, facts from opinion. And as critical thinkers, which we're all encouraging our students to be, regardless of who we are, we want our students to be critical thinkers in the 21st century. There's no real other way to be successful, is to look up and find out what are the facts from what are people's distortion of the facts. Critical race theory is never going to be taught to kindergartners. It's not going to be taught to 12-year-olds. It's not going to be taught to except probably a very small percentage of high school students. It's rarely even taught in college. I could tell you that there is probably 80% of Kent State University faculty who could not define critical race theory for you. So this is not a threat. It's just jargon. It's just rhetoric to make people be afraid. If you really want to know where critical race theory comes from, that's a process that should happen in an academic setting, because that's the kinds of discussions, that's the kind of place where these kinds of discussions take place. I also think it's important when you're looking at the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion to look at what those words actually mean, because they have impact and they have import. And so anyone who does not accept that we live in a diverse community isn't really paying attention to what's going around, watch a television show. Anybody who doesn't understand the difference between equality and equity needs to also do some investigation. It has nothing to do with the political ideology. It has to do with bringing people to the level that they haven't been afforded before. And so there are real those words are used for a reason, and they're important. They've become, DEI, and people just kind of pass on, and then, if you want to demonize it, you can. Inclusion is about making sure everybody has a seat at the table, and equity is about making sure that that seat at the table is just as good as everyone else's seat at that table, and that's important. When you're talking about history
30
and
seconds.
Some people saying that teaching there's no time for teachers to teach about race. Well, I agree that teachers are overworked and underpaid, and so they're forced to put in a lot of work into a little amount of time. But racism is part of our history, and you can't teach American history without discussing race. If you think you can, you've missed out on a large part of education about the United States that we live in.
Macabanic 4052 Osage Street. What I wanted to say actually changed quite a bit when I was way back there in line. I didn't realize how awful and terrible and racist a community and a school system this is. I mean, if I would have known this 15 years ago when I moved out here, I never would have moved out, especially with my oldest daughter who's biracial. There's no way I would have moved out here. This place is deplorable. I mean, it is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. My daughter came into this school district back in 2006, made it all the way through high school until she was 17 years old when she had a massive stroke. And before that senior year, she had that stroke in the spring. It must have been a different school system or something, because my biracial daughter, who had a stroke, who lost mobility, lost vision out of her eye, lost the ability to speak, she got all the support and everything that she needed from school staff, from administration, and she graduated among the top of her class here at Stow-Munroe Falls. I think it was Stow-Munroe Falls, wasn't it? I came from Nordonia. That's where we moved from, and you guys are making Nordonia look like a diamond in the rough, and if you know anything about Nordonia in the 80s, it's far from it. But you know what? When I was a kid, we were taught as far back as 3rd grade all the way through high school. We were taught about racism, bigotry. We were taught about slavery. We were taught about civil rights. We were taught about the role that Black Americans played in not only building this country, but in the creation of it. We were taught that in Nordonia, and I'm hearing people say that they weren't taught anything. Either Stow-Munroe Falls is the worst school district on the face of the earth, or all these people that didn't apparently learn anything is because they weren't paying attention because they didn't care. So I'm sorry, guys. You include DEI and keep putting that pressure on these children's shoulders like we've been doing for the last 20 years. Right now, we have a record suicide rate when it comes to teens, depression rate when it comes to teens. You allow this DEI to go through, you're going to be sweeping these kids' bodies off the floor just to get out of the school building.
Sorry. My name is Shannon Keeling. I live at 403 Treeside Drive here in Stow. I didn't prepare anything because I don't have to. This is my life. This is what my children live. So I am the mother of 3 students in Stow, high school and on down. And my students are Black and my boys are Black. So I say they're Black because they don't have a choice in that. That's what they are. That's how people see them. I've heard some people say, oh, just teach, not to see race and not to see color, but the truth is we do. So that being said, diversity is important because we are diverse. I mean, America, we tout ourselves on being diverse. People want to be, we want things to be equitable for all of us. We want to be included. So DEI is important. I'm going to talk about some of the experiences of my kids, and I'm going to ask some of you to ask yourselves, can you say these are your kids' experiences? I don't know. There's a lot of parents in the room, I'm sure. So when your kids' friends get mad at them, is the first word they call them a racial slur? Because my kids get it a lot. You're the N-word or whatever. These are kids that stay the night at my house, play football with my kids, basketball, whatever, okay? And I love my kids supposedly, but when they get mad, the N-word is the first word that's spit out of their mouth. My kids have been called a coon. My kids have been told they look like a slave. So speaking of slavery and teaching, and most of these kids, I'm not even mad at them because I don't think that they truly understand what they're saying. Why? Because they're not being taught. As a school system, it is the job. We need to educate our children, help them understand why that word is so offensive, or why any racial slur, I don't care if it's, toward any, or toward anybody. I wouldn't let my kid, if my kid called somebody, a white kid, a cracker or something, it'd be an issue for me. Like, it's not okay. So It's funny that the police chief was here today and we talked about that because my 11-year-old son, he was in 5th grade in 2019, so he's going into 8th grade. And I want to shout out Mike Love because that man, I know I can trust him. I wish all my kids could stay in Kempton. He's amazing. And I wish all of you would take a page out of his book because he cares. He gives a dang. He really does. And I love Mike Love. He has the perfect last name. That being said,
30 seconds.
Okay. So my son was pulled off the bus by the police because a girl attacked him. He never did anything to her. All he did was scream at her and ask her to stop hitting. He was 11 years old, barely 11, okay? The 2 students involved were black. They knew there were problems on this bus. My aunt is the head of transportation at Ravenna, so the head of transportation at Stowe spilled the beans to me. Oh, supposedly there were cameras. There were no cameras. My son was put through Stowe Youth Service at 11 years old. Never had been in trouble in his life. I mean, he's been in trouble, like, but not trouble with the police, not trouble, like, he's a kid, he's a boy with some ADHD issues, right? Long story short, my son was pulled off of the bus, put through Stowe Youth Services, and basically put through something that he should have never been through. The bus driver said she would speak up. The Board of Education didn't want to speak up. Nobody, everybody, because they were afraid to be sued. I'm not a suer, I didn't do that. Simply because he was black. At the end of the day, that is what happened.
If you could finish your thought, please.
Okay, the last thought. The police officer that brought him home, his words to me were, "Ma'am, your son was very respectful. He seems like an amazing kid. I wasn't the arresting officer. This wasn't my choice." Charging an 11-year-old kid with disorderly conduct. It's insane.
Thank you.
My name is Marilyn Hudson. I live at 1698 Bob White Trail. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are noble-sounding words. But behind such noble-sounding words lie meanings very different from that of the average person thinks of at first glance. Let's look at equity. It sounds so much like equality. We all want equality of opportunity and the equality of each individual under the law. However, equity, as promoted here, means equality of outcome. So to achieve equality of outcome, you can't take into consideration a person's character, qualifications, work ethic, or abilities. You're judging people based on skin color or ethnicity. Implementing these noble-sounding ideas has led in other schools to putting first graders into groups and label some as oppressors and others as oppressed. There has been mandatory curricula that requires teaching that all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism. I've lived in Stowe for almost 35 years. Most of the people in Stowe are busy working, raising their families, paying their bills, going to their kids' and grandkids' soccer games, and trying to get their grass mowed before the next rain shower. They are not, for the most part, racist or oppressors and should not be treated or accused of being such. This school board should be busy encouraging the hiring and promoting of the best teachers, coaches, and administrators that can be found, and not be obsessed with the color of skin. We should be helping students in our schools to be the very best they can be, not to be labeling them or bring more division to our city by dividing people along racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic lines. Stowe is not a perfect city, but it's a good city. If instances of racism pop up, then they need to be dealt with through proper legal channels. But let's not implement radical policies that are dividing communities around this country. Let's instead remind our children and ourselves to live by the tried and true rule, to treat others as we would like to be treated.
Good evening. I didn't come here with the intent of having something to say. I came to listen today. But after listening, you can see I'm towards the end of the line for a reason. I felt that I had to say something.
I'm sorry, if you could please give us your name and your address.
My name is Charlene Ramos-Chesnes, 4451 Newcomer Road, Stowe, Ohio. I'm a mother of students that attended Stow-Munroe Falls High School and middle school, a grandmother who has a granddaughter that is attending Stowe schools today. I'm the education chair for the NAACP Portage County. And I say this because I wrote things down because I want to keep my thoughts straight because there's so much I have to say. But the first thing I'm going to say is the last thing I was going to say, is looking at this board, I don't understand how you have these conversations. Because I serve on many boards, and I put myself on these boards so that I can be included in that conversation, so that you could understand where I'm coming from. I'm a Hispanic woman. And if I were on your board, we'd have that conversation about inclusivity and what that means. And what does DEI mean? And DEI, really, at the end of the day, what it means, it gives us a voice. You know, when my older children were here, and I'm going to say that 2005 year could have been May 4th. Because as you hear all the students that were in the school district during 2005, and they talk about George, and I didn't hear Miss Kellum's name. Miss Kellum was a teacher here, the only minority teacher here, a band instructor, who also took her life in that year. And that lives with this class forever. And we don't talk about it. But we need to talk about it. We need to have a board that reflects today what the school district looks like. We need to have a city council in Stow that reflects what the city of Stow looks like. We moved here when my children were in 7th grade and in 4th grade. And today, I haven't seen much change, but I'm glad that we're able to have a conversation. And if that voice is taken away, that is detrimental to this city. I think we've made great strides, and we should continue with that. You know, I support ROCKS, which gives voice to the young ladies, and a black and brown conversation. And a colleague of mine, Dr. Nelson, and I went to Kent State way back, and we've been having this black and brown conversation ever since. And it's important to have a conversation, because if we don't talk about what issues are, we'll be divided. So talking about it doesn't divide people. 30 Not seconds. talking about it, divides people. I was a foreign language teacher, and it was really important to teach culture, because you can't learn a language without a culture, right? And so I always tell people, I don't want you to see me as anything but who I am. I want you to ask me about where I come from, because you can learn a lot about my country by talking to me, you know, not just to go to the restaurant and eat food. And by the way, I am not Mexican. I'm Puerto Rican, you know, but everybody, I would start my class by telling the students, I don't make tacos. Do you know why? You know, because Caribbean people don't make tacos. So
I'm
learn
sorry,
from
that's
each
3
other.
minutes.
Thank you. And please diversify your board.
I'm sorry, before you begin, ma'am, at the end of the line, I believe we closed comments after.
Excuse me, but I have a statement to make from 3 people that came from communist countries. They asked me to say.
I understand. We closed. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Bernie Moxley. I live at 2591 Progress Park Drive in Stow. I'm the parent of 1 current SMF student and 2 recent Stow graduates. One of my children was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. My family moved from California to Ohio in 2012. My husband was hired by a company in Kent, so we began researching schools nearby that would be the best fit for our children, who were in 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade. We chose to live in Stow because of the school district. Last year, when I learned about the DEI group, I was excited to learn about what they would be doing for our schools. For years, I'd been discussing the need for some staff development on how to support students with autism spectrum disorders. As I began to read the subcommittee 1 to 3 year plans, it became clear to me that the DEI was not at all focused on inclusion for students who have disabilities. After reading the information available online, I wrote to the DEI leadership and to the school board to express some concerns. The language used in the 1 to 3 year plan and the books being used for staff development seemed biased and political. I was assured by the DEI that there was no political agenda, and I was assured that the group was transparent. I would like to ask for more transparency. Parents should have access to the list of books, titles, that will teach certain aspects of DEI. Parents should have access to the material used for the training of all staff on DEI. The DEI group claims that they are not political, yet the 3 books used for the book studies are written by political activists. The DEI group claims that they are not promoting critical race theory, yet the language and ideas of CRT are evident throughout the subcommittee plans. Do not mistake the concerns of parents like myself with a lack of commitment to addressing issues of racism in our schools. I affirm that racism remains a problem in society and needs to be addressed. I deny that critical race theory and intersectionality are useful tools to address racial issues. I contend that racism is defined as prejudiced attitudes and discriminatory behavior against individuals or groups on the grounds of race and can be addressed as such. I deny that racism is part of a systemic problem that is everywhere, always, and pervasive. I do contend that each individual can choose not to hold racist views and should be expected to do so. I believe that we can work towards shared goals and a common vision that the principles of not discriminating by race should be universally upheld. In closing, I'd like to share some positive experiences with Stow schools. In our school district, we have teachers who meet with students during summer breaks to help them with transitioning to new buildings. We have administrators who attend sporting events and cheer on each child by name. We have coaches who create a climate of inclusion that enables students who struggle socially to fit in. We have teachers who email parents to let them know their child who has an IEP raised his hand and participated in class discussion for the first time. We have teachers that call a parent to let them know their child did not sit alone at lunch.
I'm sorry, that's
that
3
day.
minutes.
I want to thank the SMF School District staff and students who work to create an inclusive environment.
I'm sorry, sir, that she will be our last comment for the evening. I'm sorry, no.
Yes, sir.
You said the same thing, and we're letting her go.
The lady in front of her gave up her spot.
Right.
It's
Okay.
just 3 minutes, I don't.
I'm sorry, if we allow you, then we have to allow everyone.
I want you to know that my heart goes out to everyone that had a student that has been discriminated about in any way, shape, or form. It hurts my heart that anything like that happened. If my children, I had 3 that went through
If
the
you could
system.
give us your name, please? Your
Oh,
name and
yes,
your
Barbara
address.
Welsh. I live in Monroe Falls. Okay. If any of my kids would have done that, there would have been so much hell to be had, it would have been unreal. Anyhow, I want you to know that I'm speaking for 3 friends of mine that came from communist countries. They were children when critical race theory started, and it is nothing but a cover for Marxism. They each told me that on an individual basis. When it started, that is when Marxism came in, it was a cover for it. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh.
5-minute break.
Okay, at this time, we are going to take a,
This is right. I have a comment. I don't know whether it's appropriate right now or for new business.
probably for new business? Yeah, okay. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We've been here for almost 2 hours, so if we need, go ahead and use restroom or anything, we will reconvene in about 10 minutes.
Stand up because my neck is killing me.
just say we're now live.
Okay, as soon as we are live on YouTube, we're gonna gavel back in. We're good? Okay, we are back in session. The next item on our agenda is,
Hey, can I say something, or you want to do new
Be
business?
under new business. It'll be under new business.
You want it at the end. Got it, never mind.
the next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Mr. Bratton for any comments.
At this time, I would like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items B through S. Also, at this time, I'd like to read the names and information of the donations listed in the consent agenda and personally thank them for what they do for our students. The following donated to the ROCKS program: Lisa Coates, $150, Rose Standish and the Field of Blooms, $250, Kyle Feldman, $225, Great Lakes Honda donated $2,000, Karen Haynes, $50, Sarah Novisky, $40, and Tier 10 Marketing, LLC, also $2,000 to the ROCKS program. Other donations: Dairy Queen Stow, they donated dilly bars to Echo Hills, Fish Creek, Highland, Indian Trail, Riverview, and Woodland for Field Day. Mr. and Mrs. Ganem, $10 to Fish Creek Elementary. The Wentz Family Foundation donated tickets to the Jake Owen concert to various Stow-Munroe Falls employees. And Virginia White donated $100 to Riverview Elementary for the PAWS program. And lastly, I would also like to recognize our speech and debate team and wish them luck as they are in our nationals, and congratulate them for that tremendous feat. So we say kudos to them.
Do the first and second.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call when you're ready, please.
Bedio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye. All right, the next item on our agenda is the treasurer's consent agenda. Mr. Gummery, any comments?
Once we have a first and second, I can speak to the financial report, but we have regular board meeting May 24th, a special board meeting May 25th, and a June 2nd board work session to approve also as minutes.
Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
And looking at the board variance report, a couple months ago, we looked like we were going to be putting a positive, more days than anticipated from October 2020 forecast, but we are trending right at October 2020 forecast, which speaks to kind of working with the administration to understand exactly where our costs are and what they're going to be. So that is it.
Any comments from the board or questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Bedio.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
New item, I asked every year at the June meeting, we have to approve the temporary appropriations to operate until we have permanent. Those are listed. I asked the board for a first and second.
So moved.
Second.
This is normally, we have to do this every year, and it's typically going to cover us through June, July, August, and September, where we'll have permanent appropriations in September's meeting.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Bedio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
I asked the board to approve the, as presented, exempt pay schedule for fiscal year 22, as outlined and presented to you guys as an exhibit.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Bedio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye. All right, next item is superintendent's recommendations. Mr. Bratton?
Thank you. I just have two quick ones here. This is the first one is Neola Board Policy 5336. This was special update from March 2021, care of students with diabetes. This is the approval of the Neola Board policies that the policy committee reviewed on March 29th, 2021, as well as on May 20th, 2021. This policy deals with the care of students with diabetes, and this policy is different simply because of statutory language changes. Copies are available for anyone after the meeting if they would like to review them, but this is the final reading of this policy.
Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
The only item for me is that if we could try to make sure on the futures, like it's helpful to know what reading it is before we come.
Yeah, that's kind of strange because usually she does that, and I'm not sure why she does that. So
Just, you know,
I apologize.
it's
yes.
helpful to the community.
Third reading, and I apologize. You're right. Yep. You're exactly right.
Any other comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Bedio.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye. Okay, the next item on our agenda is new business. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ms. Johnson Bowers. I believe she has something to add for new business.
It's time. It's good. So it's important for me to take a moment to say a few things, because I have heard things and I've seen glances and stares and snares and all that, but no one person in the world has ever asked me my opinion of the DEI committee or opinion of anything. And so I just wanted to set the record straight that I agree with you. I completely agree with you, 100%. It's appalling that anybody would be bullied. The suicide rate is horrific, and it is wrong. And yes, it is our job as the board to create a safe environment, and that's our #1 priority. We should ensure that every single student who walks into any building in the Stow-Munroe Falls School District feels safe, welcomed, and loved. That's the priority. We should make sure every student understands that uniqueness is their superpower, and they should embrace that, and they should be able to take that with their creativity and do amazing things. That is how I feel. Now, what we all need to understand is that systemic change is slow and not very fancy. Systemic change will not make the newspapers, because what we need to be governing up here as a board is change. And that's hard, because we need to embrace differing opinions. We need to understand that just because somebody's not on the pedestal next to us doesn't mean they disagree. And we need to give them time and give this time to evolve, because we want systemic change. We don't want just a poster on the wall. We don't want just a 30-second videotape. We want change that's permanent. Change that, of course, is going to start in the classroom, but hopefully will trickle down back to their homes. But that's slow, and we need to be patient with it. And we need to all be patient. That diversity means we need to embrace diverse opinions. Unity does not mean conformity. It means we're unifying to the same principles. So when I look at these things, and I read things about people's opinion, about what they think my opinion is, I'm always appalled and surprised, but not surprised. I am a Stephen Covey, highly effective teams trainer. I have worked for years helping school districts create character education programs. I've helped school districts create programs like the DEI program. I am all in on this, but I'm not of the personality who's going to stand up on a pedestal and shout as out as I can or ridicule people who don't agree with me. That's not who I am. But I am a person who's going to say that every single student who walks in to Stow-Munroe Falls, any of their buildings, should feel safe. They should feel loved, and they should have the greatest confidence. I have been very quiet up here because I am astonished that people in this world did not know that Black Lives mattered before a year ago. Because I've always known that. That's how I was raised. That's how my children were raised. It's not something, I don't need to write it on a shirt. That's what I know. So I wanted to take this second to explain to you how I feel up here. Because I am supportive of the DEI committee, and I'm astonished that people think I wouldn't be. Because that is what I've been doing. It's one of my missions. But I'm not a person to wear a shirt, because I just think we are all, and we should all feel welcome, and we should all feel safe. But I want to tell you, it is very difficult up here because we're not safe. Because dare one of our board members say something that does not resonate 100%, they will be crucified. And that's not diversity. That's not diversity. So, I am all in agreement with this. It's very important. But we need to give the DEI committee some time to develop. This is not something that happens tomorrow. This is something, if you want sustained change, is something that's going to take years to do. But they can't make progress if somebody critiques every single step. It's exhausting. And Aisha Collier, Mrs. Kosmak, they've worked very hard. And for people to tear it apart because of whatever is hard. It's hard to make positive change when there's discrepancies like that. So that's all I have to say.
Any further comments?
Just to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, through some of the public comments that are out there, there are people up here, myself included, who are not prone to shout out from the rooftops, shout out from the rafters, shout out rhetoric. I'm often criticized for being the, I guess, dispassionate attorney, I guess, is probably the appropriate thing, and I try to choose to express myself in the way that I act, the way that I vote, the support that I give. And so one of the things that I think is maybe getting a little bit lost in the shuffle here is that I know there's a desire for change, there's a desire for immediate, long-standing, lasting change, and there's sort of an acknowledgement that up here, myself in particular, on some of these issues, I'm a relative idiot. And so to ask that I somehow or the other board members push this matter to the forefront before the committee itself is ready to do that is a bit difficult, in the sense that the expectations are created of them, that they're working toward a solution. And I think one of the things that, if you look at the way that committee is structured, it's probably one of the more robustly structured committees that I think I've seen, is that they are committed to regular progress, and some of the back and forth has a lot to do with the fact that their information is constantly out there, and so sometimes seeing how the sausage is made makes people really upset and really uncomfortable, and that doesn't mean that that's the end product. And so do I want to hear regular updates from them? Yes, but I will say this, that committee provides more updates to the community and to the board than probably any of the other ones that we have in this school district. And so it's not, I guess, for one board member, it's not for me to demand that they do anything at whatever interval that I deem appropriate. I'm going to leave that to them. They're doing a good job. They know what they're doing. And to be clear, I think this board voted to create that committee, or at least voted to acknowledge its existence or put it into place. And I'm not aware of any changes in that, and personally am not changing the way that I have felt on that. And so I voted to approve that committee. I support that committee's work and will continue to support that committee's work. I will have questions for them when they bring it to us, when they bring their changes to us, but that's, at this point, that's for them to do, and not for, again, this sort of soft-spoken idiot to do for them. So That's my piece on it. I think we should all just let them do their job and address the things that they present when they actually present them.
I'd like to make a statement. The committee itself has a meaningful purpose, but how is it going to be implemented? And it's not anything that's cut in stone. But when I hear people talking about Black Lives Matter, I think of the Marxist content of it, and I don't like that saying. For all of you that say Black Lives Matter, you're entitled to your opinion, but I'm going to tell you as a board member, as a citizen of this country, all lives matter. I don't care if they're green, purple, pink, or yellow. All lives matter. You could put anything in writing, but to implement it is a different story. We have rules and regulations about discrimination, bullying, fighting, that sort of thing. And it's up to the administration, the teachers, and the students to say, hey, this is what's happening. And then take it, if there's no justification, take it home to the parents and let the parents deal with it on their level with the administration. But believe me, Black lives are not the only ones that matter. Every person in this United States, and they matter.
If I could please ask the audience to show a sense of decorum. This is a meeting in public. This is not a public meeting. Mrs. Bedio, you can please finish.
Yes, I think I've said enough. Everybody knows where I stand. I've taken a lot of criticism. I've taken a lot of hate mail, and the people are entitled to their opinion. But you know what? If you can call me names, I can respond, but I'm more professional than that.
Mrs. Bedio, I don't mean this as criticism at all. I just want to add maybe a little bit of context to this too. Wearing my other hat, the lawyer hat, I often have clients who face some of the issues that we have been talking about. I have clients who, you know, we don't have to embrace anything in particular to know that. I have clients who people think they can take advantage of them because of their socioeconomic status. I have clients who people think they can take advantage of them because that they are black. I have clients who think that, who get treated differently because they have homeowners insurance and their house happens to be in a district that had been redlined however long ago. And so those things are real, they have happened, and they continue to be a problem. And I don't think that requires any kind of grand acceptance of anything one way or the other, but I do think that there is a lot of room for discussion between the sides that we've heard tonight if people would just allow themselves to do that.
Well, like I said, you can put everything in writing, and it looks perfect on paper, but what do you do with it? What do you do with it?
Any further comments? Okay, we are moving on to next item on new business is a review of the interdistrict open enrollment policy. Mr. Bratton?
Every year, it's just presented before the board. It's just to make the board aware, and there's no action needed. There's never action needed on this policy unless there was a change that the board was openly requesting. So this is, again, just a policy making the board aware of what the current policy is and what the policy options are. So no action needed.
Okay, the last item on our agenda is an executive session for the purpose of considering the employment of a public employee. There will be no action after the executive session. May I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Johnson Bowers.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Bedio.
Aye.
Right.
Aye. We are in executive session at 7:24 p.m. Again, there will be no action after the executive session.
Where are we going?